Imagine a brilliant young man locked in lonely fascination with numbers and machines, gazing out a frosty window as war looms. A decade later, he unleashes a machine that will crack Nazi codes and help save millions of lives. But even as he saves the world, his own country will condemn him for an unforgivable secret. This is the story of Alan Turing, mathematician, codebreaker, father of computers, whose life was a study in soaring brilliance and deep betrayal. His journey evokes awe at human genius, anger at brutal injustice, and heartbreak at a fate too cruel for such a mind. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today we tell the life story of Alan Turing, the man who helped win World War II and laid the foundations of computing, yet was persecuted by his own society. We'll trace his early brilliance and struggles, the triumph of breaking the Enigma code, the foundation of modern computers and AI, the tragic betrayal he suffered, and the poignant legacy he left behind. Get ready for a roller coaster of admiration, anger, heartbreak, and reflection. Alan Turing was born on June 23, 1912, into a world at the brink of modernity. From a young age, his extraordinary intelligence was clear. He devoured science books and puzzles, often in lonely isolation. With his parents living abroad, Turing was raised by foster families, and as one biographer put it, his life was an isolated and autonomous mind. He was dreamy, awkward, and not popular among his classmates. But he found comfort in numbers and the logic of science. At age 13, he won a place at Sherborne School, where he secretly read Einstein's theory of relativity for fun. There he met Christopher Morcom, a like-minded friend who shared his passion for physics and code-breaking. The two boys became inseparable, exploring esoteric science projects together. In 1930, disaster struck. Christopher died suddenly of tuberculosis. The 14-year-old Turing was devastated. The boy had been his first love and intellectual companion. He later described feeling as if a vivid bond had been ripped away, leaving him with an ideal of love and intellect to spend the rest of his life trying to recreate. Grief drove him deeper into science. He threw himself into studying quantum mechanics and the mysteries of biology, as though in the patterns of nature he might find his lost friend. This emotional crucible forged in Turing a mixture of genius and sensitivity. In the years that followed, the bright but introverted student thrived academically. At 21, he entered King's College, Cambridge, and by age 22, he was elected a Fellow of the college for his work in mathematics. By his mid-20s, Turing had already changed the world of science. In 1936, he published a groundbreaking paper describing what we now call the Turing machine, a simple abstract device that could simulate the logic of any computer algorithm. Though it was a thought experiment, this universal Turing machine laid the blueprint for all modern computers. It was impossible to build with the technology of the time, but it earned Turing the posthumous title, the father of modern computer science. Even as a young scholar, Turing could formalize the essence of computation and showed that some problems are fundamentally unanswerable, insights that still echo in computer theory today. His mind was far ahead of its era. As Europe plunged into World War II in 1939, Turing's brilliant mind was suddenly needed for cryptography. He joined the government code and cipher school at Bletchley Park, Britain's secret wartime hub of code breaking, arriving just days after Britain declared war. There he headed Hut 8, a team of mathematicians and linguists tasked with deciphering German naval codes. The greatest challenge was the Enigma machine, a seemingly unbreakable cipher device the Nazis used to send military orders. Enigma's settings changed daily in astronomically many combinations, making it virtually impossible to decode by hand. Turing attacked this problem with characteristic ingenuity. Working alongside colleagues like Gordon Welchman, he devised a brilliant electromechanical device called the bomber, an early computer that could rapidly simulate Enigma's rotor configurations and find likely keys. Night after night, Turing and his team fed intercepted messages into the bombs, hunting patterns and cribs that would reveal the day's cipher. Against all odds, their efforts paid off. By early 1941, they were regularly cracking Enigma messages, producing vital intelligence codenamed Ultra. Historians now estimate that Turing's work at Bletchley shortened the war by at least 2 years and saved countless lives. Visually, we might imagine an intense scene. Dim lights, the constant hum of bombs running, Turing hunched over a table of gears and wires, lost in concentration. He was known to be shy and famously untidy in appearance. But in matters of encryption, he was as sharp as a blade. Every message broken was a blow to Nazi aggression. Turing's breakthroughs helped ensure that Allied convoys survived the Atlantic crossings and that key battles were won. In the words of Britain's Justice Secretary, he was exceptional, pivotal to breaking the Enigma code, helping to end the war and save thousands of lives. Yet in those years he worked in absolute secrecy. His colleagues could not even tell their families the nature of their work. The full value of his accomplishments would not be publicly acknowledged for decades. By 1945, the world had averted catastrophe, thanks in part to Turing's genius. War over, he turned his eye toward peacetime puzzles. At the National Physical Laboratory, he began designing one of the earliest stored program computers, the AC. And later, at Manchester University, he helped build the first working electronic computers. In 1950, he published the famous paper proposing what we now call the Turing test, an experiment for determining whether a machine can imitate human conversation. In short, he asked, can machines think? This question did more than any before to launch the field of artificial intelligence. Turing even did pioneering work in mathematical biology, writing papers on how zebra stripes or snail spots develop. By every measure, he was a pioneer whose insights laid the foundation of the digital age. Yet at the very moment when the nation should have celebrated him, Britain turned its back on Alan Turing. Despite his wartime heroism, he was still subject to the prejudices and laws of his time. Homosexuality was illegal in 1950s Britain, a secret subject that the law treated as a crime. In 1952, police raided Turing's home in Manchester, ostensibly looking for a burglar, and discovered letters revealing his sexual relationship with a younger man. Turing and his friend were arrested and charged with gross indecency. In a nightmarish twist, this lonely genius, who had broken the Nazis' most secret codes, was now prosecuted for loving another man. Under pressure, Turing pleaded guilty. Instead of serving time in prison, he was offered a barbaric choice: either imprisonment or a year of chemical castration. To preserve the scant freedom he had left, he chose the injections. Over the next year, he endured a regimen of female hormones that systematically stripped him of his manhood and sanity. He later described feeling a prisoner in his own body, depressed, impotent, and humiliated. The treatment's physical side effects were devastating. It took away his sex drive, gave him painful breasts, and left him in despair. In his brilliant mind, he was solving the universe's mysteries. But at home, he was being tortured by law for who he was. Even worse, the conviction cost him his career. His security clearance was revoked, and he was forbidden from doing any more work for British intelligence or government laboratories. All the doors that had opened for this extraordinary man, Cambridge fellowships, war work, research positions, were suddenly slammed shut. A notice was posted on Manchester's labs. Turing was gone. Justice Secretary Chris Grayling later summed it up. Turing's later life was overshadowed by his conviction for homosexual activity, a sentence we would now consider unjust and discriminatory. Indeed, it was a shocking betrayal by the country he had served so loyally. Prime Minister Gordon Brown, decades later, described the situation bluntly. "We're sorry, you deserved so much better," he wrote in a public apology. At the time, however, Turing had no such comfort. In 1953, he moved out of Manchester to escape the constant police surveillance. He took on research in isolation and kept mostly to himself. Friends from Cambridge tried to help, but the social stigma was crushing. In every dark corner of this tale, the emotion is clear. Here was a man who had risked everything for humanity, and then paid for it with his own humanity. On the evening of June the 7th, 1954, a silent tragedy unfolded in Turing's modest house in Wilmslow, Cheshire. The next morning, his housekeeper found him in bed, dead. On the bedside table lay a partially eaten apple. The official inquest would rule. Alan Turing died of cyanide poisoning, ruled a suicide. It seemed he had bitten into the poisonous fruit just as the fairy tale he loved had foretold. That poisoned apple became one of history's most haunting images. It was as if Turing, the brilliant codebreaker who once cracked impossible ciphers, had used an apple to send a final cryptic message to the world. Some knew of his childhood fascination with the Snow White fairy tale. The image of the sleeping princess and her poisoned apple had long captivated him. In fact, friends said Turing used to recite the witch's rhyme from Snow White. "Dip the apple in the brew, let the sleeping death seep through." It's a chilling echo, as though his mind lingered on that verse in his last moments. Not everyone accepts that his death was intentional. His mother always insisted it was a tragic accident. Perhaps he inhaled cyanide fumes from a chemistry experiment in his home laboratory. The apple itself was never formally tested. We only have the coroner's ruling. To this day, some scholars debate whether an outsider could have carried out an assassination. What we do know is beyond dispute. On that June morning, the world lost a genius. He was only 41 years old. The scene of his death, the poisoned apple by the bed, has come to symbolize the bitter injustice he suffered. A brilliant mind, rendered silent under the very laws that should have protected him. It leaves us with a knot of emotions. Some even believe that Apple's famous logo, the bitten apple, was inspired by Turing's tragic death, though Apple has never confirmed this. There is the deepest sadness that this gentle, visionary man could see no future left for himself. There is heartache for the love he was denied and the career he was robbed of. And there is anger that prejudice and hate overcame reason and decency. The image of that poisoned apple still stirs hearts. A genius undone not by a wartime enemy, but by the very society he helped save. Today, our perspective has shifted, but only after decades of delay and many tears. Alan Turing's name is now synonymous with intelligence and innovation, but it was a hard-won redemption. In 2009, 55 years after his death, Prime Minister Gordon Brown stood at Downing Street and formally apologized for how Britain had treated Turing. The debt of gratitude he is owed makes it all the more horrifying that he was treated so inhumanely, Brown said. He concluded, "I'm very proud to say, we're sorry. You deserved so much better." A few years later, the country took an even bolder step. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Alan Turing a posthumous royal pardon, a rare mercy in British law. The Justice Secretary noted that this pardon was a fitting tribute to a man whose innovations had made Britain safer and more powerful. Parliament even passed Turing's Law in 2017, which automatically pardoned thousands of gay and bisexual men who, like Turing, had been convicted of outdated charges. Justice, however belated, was slowly being served. Alan Turing's memory now stands tall, literally. A 1.5-ton slate statue of him sits at Bletchley Park as a silent sentinel, holding a sheet of paper with his famous formula. It's a breathtaking tribute from the people he saved. Elsewhere in Britain, Turing's face appears on the new £50 banknote issued on his birthday. And in 2019, he was voted by BBC audiences as the greatest scientist of the 20th century. The film The Imitation Game, 2014, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, brought his story to millions of viewers, helping them understand both his genius and his suffering. Still, for all the honors, Turing's story is deeply bittersweet. It forces us to reflect on the contrast at the heart of his life. A man of boundless imagination cast into the shadows by fear and hate. We feel admiration for what he achieved, building the first computers and kicking off artificial intelligence, but also anger and heartbreak that a society could forsake its brightest mind because of who he loved. Each statue, each pardon, each banknote is a reminder that we once got it terribly wrong. Turing's journey from secret hero to celebrated icon teaches us to cherish truth over prejudice and to never let a life's worth be measured by bias. The story of Alan Turing is a testament to human brilliance and the tragedy that can strike when genius meets intolerance. It leaves us questioning how many other Turing-like geniuses history may have lost. If Alan Turing's life moved you, his triumphs and his tragedies, please like this video, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories from history. Let's honor voices like Turing's by keeping their stories alive. Thank you for watching, and remember, let us always strive for a world that celebrates every mind, not one that punishes them.